Okay, in the previous video, we processed some existing cross sections onto cross section sheets, and then that was just prior to going out onto a field check. But now that we have the existing, we've been out to the field, it's time to start designing our proposed. And so we can look at a typical section. We're back in that curve area here north of Jacksonville. We'll zoom into it a bit. Like we had mentioned, this is what, from 2025, so this is very recent. So you can see in this aerial view that this is kind of the after. You can see that the gutter has been constructed as well as the entrances, but if we drop in with our street view guy here, we notice that it takes us to the existing, or to the what was the existing, and that was our situation. We've got that 2-lane pavement, we've got that existing gutter, not just one gutter, there's actually, it's like a double gutter. They used the initial gutter that was on the 18-foot pavement really as like a base course almost. They just resurfaced over that, and then they piggybacked on an additional gutter. So yeah, so we're just proposing to remove all of that gutter. We've got our widening. We'll go back to the typical here. So yeah, so we've got that original 969 pavement with the gutter and then the piggybacked gutter. We're removing all of that, and then we're adding some type A gutter and laying the back slope back, as well as some other work. So, you know, our next step is to move into modeling, really. Move into developing our templates that create our 3D model. So where do we start with that? Well, first, of course, we have to have some idea of what we're going to be doing. We probably wouldn't have had the typicals drawn, you know, in this kind of detail at this point, but we, you know, had some kind of concept of what we wanted, and we kind of worked on these together, developing typical sections and developing the model itself, so that we, in turn, we can process the proposed cross sections and actually add the proposed elements to the sheets as well. And of course, it's only just visualized. So what are the steps that we went about? Well, first, we will go back to ProjectWise because we need a file to begin our modeling. And our file name is called COR for corridor. It's a corridor file. This is actually where the 3D model will be created, and then this file will then be referenced into the sheets so that the cross sections show up. So I went ahead and did that already. I just used a regular seed file, just like we've been, just really a 2D seed file to get started, and went with that standard file naming convention. And so here I sit in that blank file. So just like most everything else I do, I first want to reference in those files that I'm going to need. So let's go Tools, Attach. And of course we bring in the alignment file first. That's one that's needed virtually everywhere. So let's grab that. We'll add that in. We don't really need the aerial necessarily. That's just kind of like a nice reference to have. I usually leave it turned off. The design file, remember we kind of sketched in what we wanted to do in 2D with our proposed. Again, we don't necessarily need that here, but we're going to use it as a reference. The right-of-way, we will need that. The terrain, yes, we'll add that in. And the topo, we don't necessarily need that either. Most of this is just for reference. What we really do need, of all those files that I just mentioned, What's really needed is the alignment and the existing terrain. Those two would be probably the most important when you're starting to model. So, all right, well, let's get started with that. Let's add in those files. Okay, now these files are referenced in. Let's see what we have here. Let me turn off those construction limits. We don't have those yet. Okay, so the very first thing that I'm going to do, well, I'm going to rotate this view so it makes a little more sense here. Okay, so here's kind of our concept of what we're doing through here. We're removing that existing gutter. We're placing in some proposed gutter. We've got the entrances. We're going to lay that back slope back. And so, okay, here are the steps. The very first thing that we're going to do is, now that we have, we just created this brand new 2D file. So at this point, there's really no 3D model within this 2D design file. And so that doesn't happen until we make something active. We add some kind of Z value. So just by making this terrain the active terrain, you see that it actually created a 3D model within this design file. So we have both the defaults 2D and then we've got the default 3D. So if we hold our right mouse button down and we go to View Plan 3D, we do a Fit View. You can see where we're at so far here. Okay, really, the only thing that you're seeing here is there's the terrain. Let's snap to something so we can spin this around a little bit. And then if you like, we can visualize this terrain in different ways. By default, we just have the boundary turned on. But if I hover over it and I go to my element info, I can override the symbology. And if I like, I can turn on my contours this way, or I can even go down to the override template and I can select some of the different terrains that are set up for me in advance, if at different intervals. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of what's happening with the terrain. I'll spin that around a little bit for you so you can see what's going on there. And yeah, this is the area we're actually going to be working in. This is the area here. We're going around this curve, and this is what we're going to be, where we're going to be laying that back slope. Okay. And if we like, remember one of the last things that we did, maybe 2 videos ago, we added that right-of-way. If we like, we can reference in that right-of-way file. Also, I don't think we brought that one in yet. So let's go Tools, Attach, Design, and then Design Folder, and then there's the right-of-way. And remember, not only did we bring in that 2D right-of-way line work, but we also brought in a 3D view of it. And so you notice over here, if I go to that view, kind of spin this around, you should be able to see that the right-of-way is actually in 3D now. I'll zoom into it a little bit. Yeah, it's right there. So as we lay this back, we're not going to be buying any right-of-way on this project. So when we do model this, we need to make sure that we're not beyond that existing right-of-way. And that's why I brought that in so soon. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our modeling now. We do the modeling through what's called corridor modeling. We use templates. And we're mostly working in the 2D view, but then you'll see the 3D view automatically be modeled in 3D as we add these templates. I'll show you what I mean here. Okay, so here's the process. The very first thing that you do with regular templates is that you need to first add a corridor. So in my workflow, I'm going to go up to corridors, and then I'm going to select new corridor. And then I'm going to select the alignment. And then if I want to use the active profile, I would hit reset, which I do. So left click to accept. And now you don't really see anything yet over in the 3D view because I haven't added any templates yet. But I did add in the corridor, and then the corridor is going to contain multiple templates that make up that 3D model. And then depending on the length, like this was a very long project, so I broke up the corridor, I actually went with 4 corridors because you typically don't want to go any more than 2 miles with each corridor. But then each corridor, like I said, could have multiple templates. Okay, so the next step, once we have that corridor, we can then begin developing our templates. So we go to our templates again, we stay in the corridors pull down, but we select template. And we're going to expand this out. And you're going to see in this template library that IDOT actually has a bunch of templates and components and kind of pieces to the puzzle, so to speak. I'll just go ahead and select just one of these to give you an idea what I'm talking about. Kind of looks like a typical section in a way, but it's you might say it's like an intelligent typical section that we're going to be creating here. These templates are made up of points. Like here you can see the left edge of pavement. That point has a feature definition. That point then, because it does have a feature definition, it's actually going to draw some of the line work for us. And as we said when we first got started, we did draft in. We started with that design file, and we did draft in some of the 2D line work. But now we could have waited on that. We really could have just had ORD actually create a lot of the line work for us, and that's part of what this template does. These points you'll see as we go can actually create some line work for us. And then in addition to the points, we also have what are called components. And this would be the pavement itself, the volume type items here. And again, those have feature definitions that define, that mesh as an HMA surface. And ultimately, that's going to allow us to design our project. It's going to model the project so that, we have cross sections that show up. We've got some of our 2D line work, like we had mentioned. We can export a model. I'll try not to go into everything. There's, of course, now this is getting more complex as we start talking about modeling compared to just the simple resurfacing project. This is the spot rehabilitation project, which is, I would say, much more involved than just a simple project. A lot of times we will hear is this an ORD project? And it's like, well, yes, they're really all IDOT projects right now are ORD projects. Usually what somebody's referring to is it just a simple resurfacing project that does not include any modeling with it, within the software ORD, or is it actually a modeled ORD project? And so that's what we're doing now. We're starting that modeling process of both the existing and the proposed. And so in order to get started, we're actually going to create our own, because as many templates that IDOT has in their library, there's probably never going to be a time when just so happens to be a template that's exactly what you need for your project. So what we do is we use pieces from the IDOT library. Sometimes we'll take start off with an entire template like this, if that's if there is one that very closely matches our situation. Otherwise, we can grab instead just pieces, and those would be called components. And then I end up building my template. But still, generally, I could start from absolutely nothing and build my template, but that's very, very rare. It almost never. There's almost something in the IDOT library that you can use to get started. And so on this particular job, I could go to pavement, proposed. I'm going to go look at combined pavement, like this one, for example. I don't need all of this necessarily, but what you saw in that typical section is you can see that, yes, I am going to need surface course and binder course. So, at the very, very least, I could start with something like this, and it's very easy to delete something that I don't need. And so that's what I'm going to do here. And I'm going to, instead of modifying my copy of the IDOT library, instead, I'm going to start off by just copying whatever it is that I need down in the project templates. And then I can go into this component, or components, really, and start making modifications. I can right-click, and if I don't need the sub-base or base course or any of this, I can just do that, and there, I'm down to a component mount. Of course, now this is the right side only, so what I would tend to do in a case like that would be, I would go ahead and use it, but I would start off with a clean template, so there's nothing there. I typically set the steps on here so that, it's like a snap, so I'm snapping to the closest, tenth of a foot or half a foot or whatever it is that I want to use. So I'll just set that to maybe 0.1. And then now I can go back to that component that we talked about, and then I can drag that here. And then if I want to use this component both on the left and the right side, I'm going to hit undo there. I'm still holding my left mouse button down. I can click mirror, turn mirror on essentially, and then I snap to the 0, 0, and that's the PGL, the profile grade line, which is right there. A data point to accept, and so now I have just created a template of the surface and the binder. Okay, we're going to stop the video here, and we'll continue with part 2.